Will Battlefield 2042 make a comeback? As the game continues to improve and see positive additions, that question seems to come up more and more frequently. Hey guys, LevelCap here, and today we're going to take a look at a realistic feature for Battlefield 2042. Now, as many of you are aware, the game had a terrible launch, which came as a bit of a surprise, or at least as a contrast to the marketing material for the game. The initial hype seems to have secured Battlefield 2042 a decent number of sales, meaning that if the core gameplay experience improves, it could bring a lot of players back and even encourage further sales. However, it's 9 months past the launch of the game, and it appears that most of the dev time was spent fixing bugs, ironing out performance issues, and finishing features that should have been in the game at launch. This, combined with EA rebuilding their management structure of the entire DICE studio, has led to a trickle of new content, and the player base has responded in kind. With only a trickle of active players, Battlefield 2042 has fewer people playing the game than previous games in its own franchise. So for Battlefield 2042 to make what I would consider to be a comeback, the player base would have to outperform the previous titles at the very least, which would mean basically quadrupling its current player count. And of course, that's if we're quantifying the comeback from just this purely population metric. Now let's take a look at the game as it is right now, just from a gameplay and enjoyment standpoint. I think DICE has been successfully narrowing down the fun maps and modes of this game and putting them front and center more frequently. This means that when you click on one of those front screen modes, the chance of you queuing up into a fun experience are much higher than it was before. There's also a bit more integration of the portal maps into the base game modes to try and fill in for the problematic maps that came with the game. The new exposure map is by far the best that the game has seen, and the rework of the kaleidoscope map makes it much more playable. In fact, these maps have shown that Battlefield 2042 is actually pretty enjoyable when played on a well-designed map. It's not to say that other areas of the game aren't still problematic, but it seems that the core problem of 2042's spammy, annoying, lack of cover gameplay is just the map design, and when given a good map, it's actually pretty fun. There's even times while playing that are just downright awesome and feel like any epic moment from the past 10 years of Battlefield gaming. The guns are feeling more refined, the classes are more balanced than at launch, and at least when playing the right modes and maps, I feel like your skill and strategy will pay off. Then again, when faced with the weaker elements of 2042, like vehicle balance, that joy can fall away pretty quickly. 2042 still hasn't figured out the vehicle versus infantry balance, which is further exacerbated by the majority of its maps where vehicles have free reign and infantry have little cover. There's still many ways to sort of cheese your way up that scoreboard using vehicles. The large VTOLs and Hinds have a ridiculous amount of health, making it feel impossible to kill without tons of coordination, at least from an infantry perspective. The vehicle balance is kind of a mess really, and should be a bigger focus of their map redesign to try and get vehicles in line, so it's actually fun to fight against them as infantry. Comparing it to playing Battlefield 4, the number of times I would hit a helicopter with a rocket on a regular basis was extremely high, but the rockets in 2042 have slower speeds and can't one-shot or disable transport, so it's kind of robbing the game of a lot of that kind of skill-based anti-vehicle fun. Again, however, when 2042 works, which means the right maps and right modes, it is fun. So beyond the game's lingering balance issues, currently 2042's biggest problem is still an issue of quantity. DICE knows that their maps suck, and they're giving map rotations that go between the new exposure map and the new-ish kaleidoscope rework to try and keep players on the good content. But obviously, playing the same two maps back-to-back endlessly gets old real quick, making it even more clear that DICE just needs to inject good map content as quickly as possible. And the latest Dev Talk video confirmed that Season 2 is only bringing a single new map, though it does look like we may be getting 2 map reworks in addition. This will give players many more playable maps, assuming that those reworks and the new map are good, but it's also coming at the same old snail's pace. The quantity of content isn't anywhere near enough to keep a dedicated player base entertained for long. So looking at the Steam charts, which again doesn't represent the global player base, just the ones trackable on Steam, when the next update launches, I think we can expect a similar surge of players, which will then settle down to a higher low of concurrent players. And if each subsequent season boosts the player base and then resettles at a new, high or low, then it's possible to consider 2042's player base to have a potential comeback at some point. And again, these projected metrics are not accounting for diminishing returns here or any outliers that could improve or detract from the growth chart. I would say that this is a fairly optimistic outlook, and the only thing I could see that would boost this player growth beyond the simple projection would be massive content or feature additions. 3 to 4 new maps being dropped in a single season, big new weapon bundles, server browser, and even server rentals. Those types of things could elevate the growth beyond what we have here. And again, it's really coming down to the content that DICE can deliver and the money that it's generating for them. The other factor, and this is a major one, is whether or not DICE is going to support the game after a single year of content. Players want to be part of a game that is fun but also lasts and is playable for years to come. It's interesting to look at Battlefield 5's player base resurgence, as so many players stopped playing that game while it was poorly optimized and lacked content. But leading up to 2042's release, many players were looking to come back to play some Battlefield, and of course they landed with Battlefield 5, and now they're enjoying all that extra content and optimizations that was made over the year plus of support that the game got. Which is of course nice to see now, but it's disappointing that people weren't around enjoying that content while it was actually being released and the game was being more supported. Obviously, it's not hard to see why players abandoned Battlefield 5 during its support period and are now kind of enjoying it after that phase is over. I just think many players, myself included, are afraid that the same thing could happen with 2042. The game might end up becoming good just as that support for the game is dropped, and then the people enjoying that content will be small in number compared to what Battlefield had in its heyday. It's been a very backwards approach to game rollout and certainly not sustainable for DICE. I do think it's also worth mentioning another overarching condition of the general FPS space, and that's the fact that Battle Royales have changed the FPS landscape drastically. Back when Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 were top-tier games going head-to-head with Call of Duty, nobody was playing Battle Royales. And now the majority of the FPS world is stuck on Battle Royales, and even COD's base multiplayer is losing players compared to its Warzone component. Halo Infinite, which was compared to 2042 as touted as doing things right with its free-to-play multiplayer, now has the same size player base as Battlefield 2042. And obviously, there's a lot of other factors going on, but it's certainly worth mentioning that the classic multiplayer first-person shooter, which could be considered more of a round-based, casual, team-oriented game, is losing out in a big way when compared to the Battle Royale scene. And what this means is that studios simply won't be getting as many sales for their previously classic FPS formulas, and thus content and expectations from those games is going to have to decrease as well. Now, to try and wrap up this video with a little bit more of a bow, Battlefield 2042 is massively improved since launch, but it still suffers from an abundance of poor maps, making the average queuing experience relegated to a smaller number of decent maps. Otherwise, you're going to be dropped into the same spammy, coverless, vehicle-dominated maps as you were at launch, and probably have a similarly unenjoyable experience. There are, however, more players currently playing Battlefield 2042 than before Season 1, so that is a good thing, and servers are regularly findable and fillable. And this does indicate that there is a path forward for player-based recovery, but it also seems like that path may end with dropping support for the game right as things start to get really good. Of course, I hope that's not the case, but if Battlefield 5's history is any indicator of our future, then it's a pretty likely outcome. I'd love to hear what you guys think about 2042 right now. Are you currently enjoying the game? Do you think it's vastly improved since launch? Are you looking forward to the future, or have you abandoned it altogether? Let me know in the comments if you think this game has a chance of recovering as well. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.